Dvořák's Cello Concerto, one of the greatest pieces ever written for any instrument and orchestra. In its approximately 40 minutes of duration, covers really all grounds of human experience and human joy and sacrifice, I think. It was in 1895 when Dvořák composed this great concerto, and I think when Brahms heard about it and said, why didn't I ever think to write such a great cello concerto? He didn't know it was possible. I think in his music history what we saw before was that Brahms, out of his friendship to Robert Hausmann, wrote a double concerto for violin and cello. Schumann wrote a very poetic cello concerto, perhaps exploring the lyrical side of the cello playing. But Dvořák really brought it all together and had the confidence to write a full-blown, fantastic, romantic cello concerto rather late in 1895. After he had been to New York, and I think in New York he got inspired. He also heard the cello concerto by Victor Herbert, and apparently it inspired him to take on the task to compose the great Dvořák cello concerto. He had made an attempt about 30 years earlier to write a cello concerto in A major. It was never orchestrated. I think he deserted the script and went on to other works. But when he came up with this concerto, he basically reinvented the form of a cello concerto. For me, it's a symphony for cello and orchestra. I think it's very important to see the orchestra part as also a very major part in this piece. And every cellist needs to negotiate the interpretation very much with conductor and orchestra when performed. I personally also think that it was very much influenced by his time in New York. I think my personal approach is that there are many American themes and American inspirations from the first theme to the second theme. The second theme, personally, I think it's a memory to a spiritual called Go Tell It on the Mountain. And if you hear this song, you can find it on the internet. It's still a very famous song that's sung around the Christmas time. And I will play the theme for you. You can hear the similarities. For me, this helped me to find my personal Dvořák. When I first learned the piece, I learned it in an almost academic way because I was auditioning for the Dresden Staatskapelle for the principal job. I was 20 years old. It was in 1985, and I studied very hard. And I studied, as like many of you, to impress professionals. Not so much an audience, but my colleagues, because when you audition, you have mostly instrumentalists in the audience and maybe a conductor, and everybody checks if you have the abilities to fulfill the expectations of a position you're attempting to take or to occupy. So I learned all the little details of the text and the technical challenges, and I really must say I'm very grateful to my teachers, my father, Peter Vogler, and to my other teacher, Josef Schwab, who prepared me for this audition. And I won the job, and for many years was a principal cellist. At the same time, since I was living in East Germany, I had the chance to play with almost all the over 80 orchestras we had in East Germany, because there were no real cello soloists except the principal cellists of the great orchestras. And so I was invited to play this with many orchestras also in the smaller cities, and I could make every single mistake one can imagine and every single attempt to try a different tempo or a different musical idea. And I'm very grateful for this experience, because already when the wall came down, I had already done probably more than 50 performances of the piece. And when I later came to study with Heinrich Schiff, I felt I could explore more the individual side of a soloist playing with orchestra. When I left my job with the Staatskapelle Dresden in 1996 to become a soloist, I could fully focus on understanding this piece as a performer, as the hero performing with an orchestra and negotiating each interpretation with the conductors who conducted the orchestras I was performing with. So a very different path. And during this path, I explored very much my way to find my personal Dvořák. And since I also moved to New York in 1996, I felt connected to the idea that Dvořák became very inspired by American music and the melodies you heard there, the noises you heard on the streets, and a very, very American Dvořák started to form in my heart and in my mind. And I worked with a musicologist, Michael Beckerman, on it, who also helped me later when I recorded the piece with the New York Philharmonic in 2004 to write the booklet for the recording. And we very much focused on the element of traces of American themes in the concerto. And we will talk about this when we talk about the individual movements. The other element in this piece, which I think made it such a great piece, is the element of love. I think many great pieces of art are influenced by three major components, and in this piece I feel they are so present, and it's love, joy of life, and death, presence of death and tragedy. And I think in this piece we have all these elements, and I think it's easy to, when you listen to the concerto, to find the joy and to find these incredibly fun moments of playfulness and just joy of life. And we find the story of love through Dvořák's biography. We know that Dvořák was in love with his sister-in-law, but he didn't marry her, he married the sister. She married a count, but they stayed in contact all their lives. And when Dvořák wrote the concerto in New York, he received a letter from her saying that she had heart disease and she might not see him anymore when he comes back to Prague the following spring. Well, he came back to Prague and he still saw her, and she died, and he went to the funeral and he rewrote the whole end in B major of the last movement. And I think he ended the piece in a combination of embrace of life and a little requiem for his love. And I think so the element of love goes through the whole concerto, mainly through a song they both shared at their secret favorite song. Dvořák composed this song. It's called Leave Me Alone in My Dreams, or Lass mich allein in meinen Träumen. And this song you can find all over the Dvořák Cello Concerto. We will talk about this when we go into detail, but I think the magic of him thinking about her during the composition, while in New York, while in Prague, and even after her death, gives a magic touch to this fantastic piece. And if we combine it with American inspiration, which we also see in the New World Symphony, for example, then we come maybe on the right path to understand why this concerto became such a masterpiece and has such an amazing effect until today on all musicians and on all audiences in the world. One more point from my side, I would like to say that the form of the piece, the form of the Dvořák Cello Concerto is also quite perfect. If we look at the first movement, that is a really statuesque movement that covers already all expressions we can think of and has already an ending where often the audience breaks into applause and thinks, oh, this was so great, such a great ending, we need to clap. And I'm, in opposite to some of colleagues, I'm always happy when the audience breaks into this applause, because I think, yes, this is a complete piece by itself. And we come to the second movement, and the second movement actually finds another language. It finds a language of lyricism and poetry and really very quiet celebration of music and romanticism. And we come to the last movement, and again he finds another element. There is the joy of folk music in it, and he uses all his experiences from his earlier works to incorporate music from the countryside, like in the Dumki Trio and in many other works we can find those expressions. And then comes back to quoting the famous song, Leave Me Alone in My Dreams, in the end of the concerto, and ends it with this incredible B major section. So I would say that the Dvořák Cello Concerto in its approximately 40 minutes of duration, covers really all grounds of human experience and human joy and sacrifice, I think. So, and our job as a soloist is, I think, to convey this to the audience and to try to tell the story through these 3 sections or 3 movements in a way that the audience can relate to it and maybe go home with the same feeling or some of the feelings Dvořák might have had during composing the piece.